So we're going to begin with our great panel of deans and Doug Palmer from University of New Mexico. Doug?
Well, actually, I've changed appointments, evidently. This is the way you learn these things. Actually, Texas A&M University. It's fairly common, actually, in administrative situations. So, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Good morning. This is always kind of an interesting process, as an aside. Interesting in a couple of frames. First of all, I tend to believe that expertise is a rather narrow band phenomena, and with administrators it gets really narrow. So the presumption that I have a significant amount of expertise to be able to contribute is always kind of a challenge. The second thing is to be able to say it in 5 minutes, which is what we've been challenged to do. So with those kinds of constraints, here goes. Texas A&M University, I'm going to give you a bit of a context. Texas A&M University is an AAU institution, which is a top-tier research category of institutions within the United States, and actually there's a couple of Canadian institutions also that are part of this. Generally, not in all instances, but generally, they would be characterized in terms of teacher preparation as being high quality and rather small boutique programs. At Texas A&M University, one of the elements that makes it rather interesting is the fact that we are a land-grant institution which has a significant commitment to the preparation of large numbers of teachers, at the same time engaging in a significant amount of research. From some recent analysis that we have done, what we have found is that in most of our teacher training programs, the vast amount of the teaching that goes on is not by our tenure-track faculty. It is by clinical faculty, and it is by doctoral students. Now, this is under supervision by faculty and so forth, but the fact is that our traditionally viewed research faculty are not, in most instances, actively engaged, which provides an interesting context. So here's some of my reflections and some of the challenges and some of my notions about the integration of IT in teacher preparation. First of all, one of the things I reflected on is Phil Jackson's book, Life in Classrooms, in 1968, that was written. And for those of you who may not be familiar with this, it was a text that was done based on a set of observations that he made in it was actually elementary grades classrooms. And he talked about this notion of a hidden curriculum, which included notions of living in crowds, reflection on the kind of communication and management patterns that occurred, and the notions of evaluation, which are rather frequent and public. I would argue that what Phil Jackson saw in 1968 is not that dissimilar to what is currently going on within classrooms today. I also recently read Steve Jobs' biography, and you reflect in 1978, 10 years after Phil Jackson's published book, the Apple II came out. And think about the change that has occurred in terms of personal computing, power of information technology, information transfer that has gone on in that period. It's been obviously a dramatic difference that is occurring. So we have, in my mind, a significant gap between, I would say, teaching innovation, technology innovation, and subsequent educational practice. I would also note to you that as was reflected on in the Jobs book, that the notion of transfer of technology and innovation is not unique, or the problems in transfer of technology and innovation is not unique in terms of teacher preparation activities. In fact, Xerox was the first producer of GUI technology, but the machine they produced was not only clunky, it was $17,000, in contrast to the Mac. So the issue, how do we have transfer that is going on in a way in which it is both usable and feasible in terms of cost? Well, again, there's a number of factors, I believe, that have a significant impact on limiting our transfer of information technology into teacher preparation. And I don't want to get into all of those because, again, this is part of the challenge of a 5-minute reflection. But I would argue that much of what is a restriction on this is in part a resistance to change. The notion that higher education is a bastion of innovation, I think, is something that could be challengeable. And so for those of you who are working, obviously, in higher ed, know that the idea of the incorporation of alternate models in both the delivery and assessment of instruction can be met with a number of challenges, many of whom are related to your colleagues down the hall. So, but it's not unique to IT, I should also note to you. The fact is that I would argue that much of what we've learned in the cognitive sciences pertaining to instruction, learning, and assessment are also not evident in teacher preparation. So I'm really reflecting on the idea of how do we facilitate transfer? How do we facilitate the transfer and the utilization of IT and innovation within teacher preparation? Because obviously it seems to me that we are bound by the fact that in many cases, well, first of all, it's not happening in large part. It does happen in snippets, but how come it's not being generalizable and being used regularly? So I'm trying to suggest, at last few points here, is the fact of some of my reflections on this. First of all, we have, and there'll be some opportunity later on to talk about this, we have a variety of activities going on within our college that are involving both the integration of information technology within our various methods classes and other classes. We also have some standalone classes. We have got some interesting R&D that's going on. But one of the things that has become apparent to me is the fact that if I could adopt the term, that the notion of crowdsourcing may be a really interesting way to reflect on the development of and the application of technology within teacher education. I.e., what I see is the fact that sometimes it's on the faculty side, sometimes it's students, sometimes it's practitioners, but what's happening is that they are trying to do things using technology to address particular needs. And it's almost creating kind of a wiki environment here where there's a generalized knowledge. It's not coming through necessarily AERJ, or it's not coming through other kinds of research journals. It's coming through the application themselves. And obviously, it seems at some level there is some ecological validity to some of this kind of information. The second notion here that I have, and that again, this is going on within university settings. Part of the challenge, I would argue, is the fact that there's not been a lot of evaluation that has occurred as part of this process. But I would argue that the universities can really play a critical role, and particularly a critical role as it relates to research and development. I will reflect on the 60s counterculture statement, just don't do something, sit there, to the notion of just don't use technology, study it. I believe we've got the capacity to be able to do this, but oftentimes we're implementing a great deal of technology uses or accessing information off the web, etc. But the notion is, how much are we studying what is going on here? And just yesterday, I was in one of these kinds of gatherings where a corporation I was holding a check that a corporation was giving us a chunk of money. It was a technology company that had been actively involved in the development and spending a lot of their money, by the way, in the development of a site that would be used by teachers. And then I asked, well, how much research and development have you done on this site? Of which there was a significant amount of, well, first of all, there was kind of a lag, in the response. And then it was, well, there was a study that was done last year. And I won't go into the nature of the study, but hazard to say at this point that despite a $40 million investment, there was very little in the way of R&D that was going on related to this. So I believe that we can play an important role in that area. Moreover, I believe that we've got the opportunity to work in multidisciplinary groups with IT and content specialists that can be involved with the design and the implementation and the evaluation of IT that reflects on the instructional context, that can reflect on the nature of the student, the nature of the content, and the nature of the setting. Not to try and just focus in on our college, but one of obviously your colleagues and my faculty, Trina Davis, has got an NSF project in which she is actively working with mathematicians, and she is a math educator, also an educator, has a focus also in educational technology, and also is working with people who are concerned about culturally responsive teaching. And they have been designing in a 3D simulation environment with Second Life as the structure for this, a classroom that students in our teacher preparation program that are in a math education class, problem-solving class, are participating in, and they are actively engaged in working in this environment to facilitate this. Again, the notion here isn't just the design of it, however, it's the evaluation of it that is going on, and working in this multidisciplinary environment to help support this. The final point I would make is the fact that this is extraordinarily important. I'm sure I'm speaking to a choir here, but the fact is that we are not doing all that we need to be doing within colleges of education and human development to try to address these kinds of issues. And my concern in part in this area has led me to establish a signature initiative, which means we're going to try and generate and put in a lot of resources into identifying an individual that we can be building a team around in the area of cyber learning with a focus on STEM education. This is absolutely essential to what we're doing. We have got, I think, a lot of collaboration across our university to include people in the visualization group, in the College of Architecture, people in computer science and engineering, College of Science, a number of different groups. So I believe we've got a lot of capacity to be able to address this, but this is extraordinarily important, and we have a long way to go. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dick Howell. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at the University of New Mexico. New Mexico is our neighboring state to Texas. A lot of people forget that. They seem to think about Arizona and then Texas and Colorado, and then they kind of forget that there's something in between. When Mike first talked to us about the structure of this, he told us that we had 5 minutes. I had this immediate visualization of a very hungry child in a candy shop who'd just been told he only could pick one piece of candy. And it was going to be very difficult, obviously, for us to do this, so I'm going to do my best. We each had questions, focusing questions that we were going to kind of concentrate on, and I'd like to relate my question to you and then the response. The University of New Mexico exists inside of a very unique state. It has 21 independent, sovereign Native American nations. At the same time, the educational achievement of Native American children is at the bottom of all achievement scales in the United States of America. In addition, these independent tribes and nations are also dispersed over a very large geographical area. How can we design and deliver instructional programs to these students and that is both culturally appropriate and instructionally effective using new technologies? So I'd like to go into the programmatic side and then the delivery side if I could. Our approach at UNM is to produce both great teachers and great leaders to the tribal education agencies and those public schools that have large populations of Native American students. We're approaching this challenge from both directions, from the classroom instruction side as well as from the leadership side. To do this, we're developing great teachers, and we have well-developed teacher education programs at UNM that every year graduate between 12 and 15 Native educators, almost all of whom return back to their native tribes. Our Great Leaders program is our latest undertaking. Beginning this fall in 2012, we will initiate a new master's and doctoral program in Native American leadership. This pipeline program is a completely collaborative effort with UNM's Native faculty, the tribal leadership, our educational leadership faculty, and the Los Alamos National Laboratories. In terms of the design, we believe that both the curriculum and the instruction must be designed by Native as well as non-Native faculty. When we talk about co-creation of curriculum, it's actually a merger of indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge but does not favor one perspective over the other. The focus is on building new educational infrastructures that are unique to each tribe, since each tribe has a different culture and language and religion. The Western contributions include structures and organizations, systems theory, and database decision-making. The indigenous knowledge contributions include the history of sovereignty, tribal governance structures, and traditional educational approaches. We're also using co-teaching models. We'll be using native faculty from both the university and our community as adjuncts and part-time faculty, and we've expanded our teaching task force to include our own native faculty, faculty from Native American Studies, and tribal leaders from the northern and southern Pueblos, as well as the Navajo Nation. They've been given academic appointments and will be instructors in our new program. In terms of delivery, in order to reach the largely rural tribal communities that are scattered throughout New Mexico, we are the 5th largest state by geography in the United States. We had to create a hybrid or blended delivery system. Focus groups with Native students indicated they were not comfortable with completely online delivery, even though that would have been the most efficient and cost-effective. They felt we had to have a combination of on-site, on-campus, and virtual learning options open to them. As such, our delivery model includes all 3 forms of delivery. Unfortunately, this also drives up the cost of programs, and we're still concerned about sustainability of this model over time. So we're gathering information on the overall cost of delivery and working with our partners, all of whom are providing funds and personnel to this effort. And so we're going to go forward with these programs and try to approach this problem from 2 directions. And with that, we hope to affect the achievement gap that currently exists between Native American and Anglo communities in the United States. Thank you very much.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui, kia koutou, kua hui hui mai nei, welcome. I've just greeted you in Māori language, and Dick and I have been talking about our cultural dimensions that are prevalent in both our education systems and the need to address those directly. Our Ministry of Education currently has a huge drive to make sure the Māori population of New Zealand are well served for and with Māori, and I'll talk about that later if we get the questions up later. So I'm happy to talk about that. But I'd like to talk more about the context that our university is in at the moment. The University of Canterbury, as you know, probably is in Christchurch, New Zealand. In September 2010, we experienced a 7.2 Richter scale earthquake. We have had a series of, my colleague tells me, 10,000 earthquakes. I thought it was over 7,000. But since that time, we've had a number of earthquakes over 5 and over 6 on the Richter scale. 700 of the Central Business District buildings have been demolished. We no longer have a Central Business District. Many of the buildings in our university are unfit for use. So we've had to reshape, reorganise how we deliver programs and deliver our teacher education in particular. Our staff have been disaffected. Many staff have left. We have lost approximately 2,500 students due to movement and changes in the system and unwillingness to stay in the city. We are also experiencing huge changes in the schooling sector, whereby schools and early childhood centres are closed because they are damaged, or that they are such a need of repair that they are unfit for use. So while this is major disaster management territory, it also provides opportunity, and we've seen huge resilience, empathy and collaboration amongst our staff and students, and that's to their credit, I might add. So disaster necessitates courageous teachers and leaders, and we've had to move right into that space whereby we've made major leaps in the ways in which we mitigate against future disasters or future disruption. This has meant we've made a huge leap into the e-learning space. our staff, while most of them were semi-experienced in working in the e-learning online space, because we've been in distance learning for at least the last 15 years. And over half of our students learn by distance through blended models of learning, not completely by distance, but blended models where they do intensives. We were somewhat well along the track, but it has been a huge leap for our staff when they are told that they will now receive all assignments online. They will mark all assignments electronically. They will design and build electronic environments because you may not have a classroom. So, alongside this, as I say, the school system is also changing, and there's a rollout from the Ministry of Education for ultra-fast broadband across all schools in New Zealand by the middle of 2013, hopefully. 2016, Nikki tells me, but 18 months there. They're pretty hopeful on 18 months. That will shift and change the whole context in which New Zealand education system is based, while and of course puts teachers and teacher educators in a space whereby they need to rapidly develop their skills and platforms on which they operate. So for us, there's a huge need for professional development of our staff. I think Doug mentioned something about that, the people along the corridor. How do you get them on board? And we're trying to look at peer mentoring models, all sorts of other models of how we might work in clusters and groups to support each other to move forward very, very quickly. But it also provides opportunities for us in terms of professional development and research as to how these changes play out in the education system more generally. So I see my role and my challenge is firstly to support staff and students, but also to secure the resources that we need and advocate for our staff across the university as leaders of e-learning as they will become across the university. So they will become mentors of other faculty right across the university. And they already are, but we'll be building on that. I also see that there is a huge need for us to connect more meaningfully with our partners, our schools and our early childhood centres that we work with most closely, that are supporting our students on professional practices, and how our students can act as mentors for the teachers in schools. So Nikki Davis is a key leader in this field, and she's operating online ICT-PD professional development clusters, which are operating in blended online models, and our professional development models have moved to that blended mode as well. Also, to support staff, we've put together a flexible learning option committee who are driving and advising on policy and practices to help the rest of the staff and the ways in which we might develop and operate. And I must say, it has been absolutely impressive the way our staff have been open-minded and willing to take on board new and innovative ways of operating very, very quickly. But for me too, I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you to the organising committee, particularly Ray and his team, for giving me the opportunity to find out about new innovations and what we need to do in terms of looking for those pockets of innovation that shine light on the sorts of things that show promise for greater outcomes than expected. And in terms of our research, that's what we're looking for as well. We're looking for those pockets of innovation that show promise and that we can transfer to more generalisable forms. While we've been in disaster mode, incidentally, we've also been in a huge academic change, and we've gone through review, renewal and redesign of 5 different qualifications that we offer in the College of Education. So our rate of change, when you talk about exponential, is exponential to the exponential because, just because of our context. So if you're talking about rapid change, then we've really been in there, right, full and truly. So thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to your questions.
I'm Rivka Vadmani from Israel after 20 hours of flight. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for inviting me to side conference. I'm the Vice President, the Dean of the Graduate School, and the Head of the Graduate Program Technology and Education at Kibbutzim College of Education, Technology, and Arts, the biggest college of education in Israel. 6,000 students are studying in this college, which is located in Tel Aviv. Here you can see Israel, it's a little country, and this is our college. I'm also a member of the National Council for Higher Education in Israel. My research and expertise are in educational technology, teacher education, and teacher training. My main courses, research topics, and publications include technology and cognition, ICTs to enhance learning and teaching, integration and implementation of change in information-rich learning environments, application of technology and new media in schools, integration of educational programs related to the intelligent use of the internet in teachers training colleges, and the use of technology in bridging cultural gaps. Our goal in our college is to lead the development of members in the education community with broad horizons, humanistic values, personal initiative, and social responsibility. Kibbutzim College of Education is devoted to the goal of achieving a master's degree for every teacher and educator in Israel. The aim is to enhance the status of educators in Israel by providing them with a broad education and extensive professional knowledge. All my students in the graduate program, Technology and Education, are teachers. All of them might become technology leaders in their own schools and community. Although in recent decades, ICT technologies have a strong impact on our society and culture, no real change has taken place in most of the educational systems. Even in places where advanced technologies have been applied, there is no clear-cut evidence that they have had an influence on teaching or have improved learning processes. Most teachers employ technologies in linear, authoritative methods that place the teacher in the center and overlook the need to create real change in classroom teaching. In most instances, the use of technology does not cause the teachers to critically survey teaching and learning processes to identify the new opportunities that technological tools afford. Once again, the Ministry of Education in Israel is in the process of leading a national program that focuses on technology. It is entitled 21st Century Skills. As a part of the plan, they are already more than halfway of distributing technology, laptops to every teacher. Our challenge as teacher training professionals is to make sure digital pedagogy is the core essence of this initiative. In my opinion, our biggest challenge today is to recruit and train pedagogical innovators and not technologists. I will explain later what we are doing in our college in order to fulfill this mission. Thank you.
On the speakers page, we have background information about the deans, so if you want to contextualize your question. We posed some questions to you at the beginning. We've got your responses, and they're on the screen. So the audience can see the screen. Mike, if you could tilt them this way so the deans can see these questions. I'll read the question aloud, and you'll see the results, and I'll ask any of the deans to respond to that question. So this question asks about the program at your institution values the knowledge and traditions of non-dominant cultures within different educational systems. To what extent does that happen at your university? You might not be able to see it as clearly for the deans. Strongly disagree is on the bottom, strongly agree is at the top. So we trend to indifferent, to agree, still have a bit of disagree, and strongly disagree. So reactions to that question from any of you.
Well, it's encouraging, you know, to have that large level of agreement that there is a honoring of that. How that actually plays out is also something that's very important to consider. That goes back to something that Rivka said that I think is very important, is evidence of change. And we actually have to have on-the-ground evidence of change of curriculum. It needs to be played out inside a culturally competent kind of context so that we actually see this in our students and then it's transferred into the schools. It's a long pipeline process of change, and I'm hoping that we're all dedicated to that.
In New Zealand, it's a requirement. So it's not a do you or don't you, but we do have a very bicultural strength to our education system. Recently, our Ministry of Education released a document called Te Taiako, which can be found online. If you'd like that link, I can get that to you. But what it does is it explains cultural competencies, and it also describes them from a student's perspective. So it indicates if, from a student's point of view, saying if my teacher was culturally competent, I would see them doing the following behaviours. So it's a very interesting document from that perspective. But also, coming into teacher education, it means there are challenges for us in working in the e-space and making that culturally congruent. And that's our biggest challenge, is how do we build capability and capacity in ways that are for and with particularly Māori students, but also Pacific Island students. And they're the sorts of things we're working on, is how do you make your online pedagogy or the ways in which you operate in that space more culturally congruent.
Mike, you want to handle that one?
Just briefly, I have noted to the faculty the fact that if we don't address the achievement disparities that are occurring within this country, then I question our relevance as a college within the university. It is absolutely core and central to us in all dimensions. And in this case, we're talking about information technology, but it's information technology that is integrated within our various methods and various preparation classes to ensure the fact that we are preparing individuals who can effectively work with an incredibly diverse and becoming more diverse state and nation. But obviously, I feel like there's a lot that we need to address that we haven't. But again, I will frame it within the notion of it isn't just implementing a variety of curricular changes or identifying things that could possibly work. We ought to be actively involved in the study of this to ensure the fact that what we are learning that we can be, first of all, building on it in a local sense, but also transferring this understanding to the broader field.
So Mike, before we go to the next question, if you'd like to ask a question, you can start to line up. And I'm going to ask the first one. Dean Palmer, you asked a question at the beginning that I think Dean Vodmany answered in a way that concerns me, but I think she's accurate. And let me contextualize this. While at site, many of you heard, we've been working with Microsoft in the Teacher Education Initiative. To do that, we visited Redmond. We worked with them. They have research psychologists, cognitive scientists, PhDs. They're spending millions of dollars to quantify fun. When they release Halo will make as much in a weekend as the top 5 grossing films make an entire summer. So you asked the question, what are we doing to measure this and to assess it? And yet Dean Vodmany says right now the data suggests that the technology integration is not moving things forward enough. So could you respond a little bit to that research issue? Why aren't we doing the assessment? What can we expect to find? How can we advocate at site and as deans in colleges of education?
Oh my gosh, this is a significant question. You know, in fact, I had a late evening discussion with Punya Mishra. I don't know if Punya is here, but the issue of why are we not you know, finding this? Why are we working kind of a wiki, using my term, a kind of a crowdsourcing environment where we're trying out various things, whether the various things are coming from corporate environments or professional groups or other groups? You know, why are we in that situation? Why is there not R&D? In part, one of his responses was, which is an interesting reflection, is the fact that the innovation is accelerating at such a rapid rate. By the time information is published, it becomes useless. The fact is that it's no longer relevant at some point because of the fact that there's been such significant change that is going on. So it's very hard to keep up with this. And by the way, I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with this, but the NSF had a report on cyber learning a couple of years ago, and the issue was how do we make sure that we are, while we are engaging in gathering information, that information is out there directly. So in part, I would say we may have to have a different frame about how to both I would say access information and distribute information outside the normal frames that we've had.
You're educating about 6,000 students. The data don't show that the technology integration is yet working, but you're still moving forward. Speak to that.
I would like to explain how we prepare teachers that might become leaders in their schools and communities. So you give me my 5 minutes now? Yeah? Okay. You see, it's very difficult in such a short time to explain the vision, but I'll try to do it. So, talking about technology, in my opinion, 3 levels of modern technologies call for paradigmatic change in relating to the use, integration, and assimilation of technology in learning and teaching processes. These are an alternative reality, social networks, and mobile technologies. In the first, the technologies of alternative reality make it possible to propose in the learning environment a combination of imagined reality and or layered reality, giving the learner a previously unknown learning experience. Pedagogical approaches that elicited much interest in the past and partially unsuccessful attempts at application were not given a proper chance because until the recent developments of alternative reality technologies, the means for applying them were lacking. The ability to introduce experiential learning in all spheres of knowledge call for a re-examination of the learning environment and its adaptation to the various curricula. That same paradigmatic shift in the perception of the learning environment offers an additional level of technological and cultural development, the social networks. The wide distribution of environments such as Facebook has led to a significant expansion in the use of these technologies. Nearly everyone uses them nearly every day. Social networks offer a new opportunity to examine the concept of sharing. It is not surprising that social protest movements have been sprouting up all over the world in the present age. The ability of every person to be part of a social movement, to contribute to the general good, to be aware and to take on responsibility for change inevitably leads to the need to examine the involvement in the learning environment. Social networks, the development of communities of learners, the building of shared databases, all of these require a re-examination of roles and areas of responsibility. The third level of end-user technologies, which does not allow us engage in education to remain indifferent, is that of mobile technologies. The fact that these popular and very accessible technologies enable every learner to make unlimited information with him wherever he may need it totally changes the concept of authentic learning. The boundaries of time and place take on new dimension. Wherever the learner is, that place becomes a learning environment. The term independent learner takes on new meaning. In light of the technological innovations and their potential to empower pedagogical strategies, we need a new approach of pedagogical strategies. We call it digital pedagogy. The new pedagogical world is obligated to revise its goals and reformulate the image of the new teacher, the digital pedagogue, who feels he or she has a mission. That teacher understands the new opportunities offered by the technological world to create a learning environment that can cope with value-laden tasks better than any time in the past. The teacher's role is to refocus educational activity on creating a person who loves people, loves to learn, loves to create, and loves to live. A challenge of this kind necessitates a change in the perception of the learning environment, of the role of the learner, and the role of the teacher. Such a new pedagogical world must also be capable of meeting the challenges that the world poses to the educational system. Knowledge that renews itself at a dizzying pace, unrestricted access to knowledge, new tools and channels of communication between people and cultures, opportunities to imagine different realities, technologies that document and organize vast databases, mobile technologies that make all of human knowledge available to every person at every place and every time. What enables our learners to share in the creation and design of this learning environment is the tools for shared learning, access to boundless information, research problem solving, conflict resolution, experiential learning, communication without boundaries, the creation and production of every type and variation of learning products. It is the learning environment that helps raise our students who are aware of themselves and of the world, skilled in cooperating with others, youth taking responsibility for their learning, who love challenges and are anxious to solve problems, are capable of broad, unlimited thinking, initiate new ideas, and are accustomed to change. The digital pedagogue and the digital pedagogy constitute the opportunity to create a new person and a new culture. Our goal is to train digital pedagogues. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we could get people back up to the microphone, and as we're doing that, we'll go to one question and go to the audience, please. So the question, and line up, please, for you to ask questions. The response to the program at my institution integrates learning technologies with pedagogical practices. Mike, if you could stand to the side so the deans can see that, please. So there's again, strongly disagree on the bottom, strongly agree at the top. We've got a little bit of weight at the bottom. So some people, a trend upward, but a significant number of people that aren't quite bringing these two together. Some thoughts on that from the deans? The question is about the integration of learning technologies with pedagogical practices. Any view on that?
Well, I think that Doug mentioned that we live inside of a push-pull environment inside of universities. The fact of the matter is that we have significant numbers of faculty that come from another era, folks of my generation, quite frankly, and that those folks are, pulled kicking and screaming into a new pedagogy that Rivka talked about. And so we have those kinds of situations occurring where we have young faculty coming in that are absolutely brilliant, working inside of digital spaces with such ease that it's amazing. And then we have the other side of the picture. That's the reality of American universities. It's exacerbated inside of research universities such as Doug's and mine, where you have the reward system aligned to something other than teaching. And so we have a lot of different challenges that we face inside of universities in America.
Similarly, in New Zealand, we have a range of faculty who have a range of experiences. But as I mentioned, we're working towards that and using peer mentoring, methods of professional development within, so that we're utilising expertise and leveraging off that expertise. I think we can still do a lot more. We can use staff and students actually in a way to demonstrate new practices, because new things keep coming along all the time. And so it's how do you incorporate innovations. As we know, innovations are also exponentially changing and improving and increasing. So how do you build that into a professional development model? And I think that's probably what we're all trying to grapple with, is how do you upskill staff and therefore the students they're teaching in a way that enables them, but also is sustainable without overloading them at the same time.
In our college, all practices are combined with learning technology. That's what I explained before. In order to have this digital pedagogue, the new teacher, we have to combine technology in all our disciplines and also in practice. We have some problems that the students arrive to schools that school is not very well equipped with technology. So there is a gap between what they find in our college and what they find in schools. And we have to overcome these obstacles.
From the audience, if you could state your name and where you're from before you ask your question. Necessary.
My name is Bonnie Sutton. I'm from Washington, D.C. And my concern is that a lot of people are playing with 2.0 tools, which they think is technology, and that a lot of people think if you give people a tool, that they are technology enhanced. And they don't know. When I post TPAC on discussion sites, they go, what is that? And that should not be possible. But the other thing is this. I want to talk about indigenous. I went to New Zealand by invitation. When I went there and saw that the Maori were a part of the educational system, I was flabbergasted. My mother's Native American. She went to town at first grade so she could go to school. But you know what? I've also been beat up by Black History this month. But what does that mean? Do I dislike Black history? What I'm saying is we have the technology to integrate all kinds of culture. I wanted to take everybody with me to Paul's lab, Paul's visualization lab. It was so awesome because we integrated all of those kinds of things into meaningful technology. But I think what happens is people Twitter and tweet and Facebook and social media, and the content is lacking so that we get to understand each other. And I propose that next time at least there's a video or something to show the leadership that Paul has by taking all of the things and integrating them into a lab to change education. And so my question to you is, how can we make this more widespread?
We really appreciate your comments because, you know, technology without content is meaningless. And everybody who is in educational technology knows the raw truth of the matter is that content is about 90% of the issue. And that if you look at the most expensive part of any undertaking, it doesn't matter what it is, Halo, you know, SimCity, it's always the content that matters. And that includes educational practice. What matters is our programs. What matters is what we do. I'll give you an example of what I really think is an extraordinary system of schools in the United States. It's the New Tech Network. They had a visit to one of them at the beginning of this conference. I don't know if you've ever been to one of these high schools. You need to go. The reason is because, of course, it's technologically enabled. The teachers are selected for their technological expertise and their ability to live in a digital world, but that's not the real foundation of the New Tech Network. The New Tech Network is built on concepts of problem-based learning. So all the kids are engaged in authentic problems. Like my son is in one of these schools. This summer he looked at, they were investigating the oil spills. They investigate it through a team-based philosophy. They have project teams. The kids actually wander around the school in their project teams. I had a fabulous math educator that I brought from San Diego to the school, and I met my son walking out the door, and I said, son, you know, the kids can come in to listen to this. He said, sorry, Dad, I've got to work. I got my team. And so they actually walked off, and, you know, I'm sitting here with this, you know, famous guy, you know, and the kids are out working. Bottom line is that the other thing they do is integrated curriculum. So the curriculum is not siloed, it's actually integrated. They might be doing geometry and art at the same time. All of those features change the environment of a school so dramatically that it is a new environment. And I want to note that we can do this in education, but it's not the technology that's driving it. It's actually the program and the construction of curriculum.
Hello, my name is Larry Tinnerman. I'm from Indiana State University. And I have a question that's more philosophical in nature. Johns Hopkins University just revealed that the second generation of technological students, our younger kids in high school, are starting to lose the capacity for empathy, personal relationships. They also cite that Facebook social networking may be actually a symptom rather than an event of isolation, people isolating themselves. how do we protect, as we become more and more involved in distance learning, those aspects which are just as critical as the content that people are learning, the personal, human, face-to-face interactions and empathy building that needs to be placed for a fully developed, educated person?
I can react because your comment is very important. And I think that also if we are talking about technology, and technology is not the issue as I said before, okay, but modern technologies make it possible to create a direct link between teachers and their students, maybe better than in the past. So that caring teacher, and you are talking about caring teacher, teaching can be accomplished in the best possible way, also with technology. That, and we must use the technology to emphasize those tasks. Also the caring and the empathy towards our clients, students, the pupils. There is no contradiction, but we have to use them in a value-added way.
Can you clarify, when I started several years ago, my class size was about 22. This semester, because of distance education, I have classes of over 70. How do I empathize with 70 kids?
It's a very good question. One of the things that, and there's no simple answer, I don't think, but some of the things that help are the language that we use, the ways in which we enculturate identity, and the culture that we establish in an online environment. And I think some of those things, language, identity, culture, if we take that as a package, you know, and we try to work with that the ways which we communicate and the ways we encourage and teach our children to communicate are going to be crucial in the future. And that's how we build empathy, really, in terms of communication skills, I think.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, my name is Janet Adigbin from Tshwane University of Technology in Pretoria, South Africa. My PhD research has been on looking at how beginning teachers and experienced teachers use ICT tools to teach data processing in vocational education schools, technical schools. Now, in my findings, we have discovered that the beginning teachers that are expected to be able to know how to use these technology tools and to even be enthusiastic because they are just coming out of the their professional development from teacher training colleges. We discover that the main barrier that has been hindering even the innovative ideas in integrating these technology tools in the classroom has been the teachers facing technical problems. Why they are using all these ICT tools, sometimes the interactive teaching board they're supposed to use to load all the software inside that interactive teaching board and begin to use it to instruct the students and to also achieve their objectives. Sometimes there will be some minor technical problem, like maybe the screen going blank, or sometimes, you know, there are technical problems that will come, that maybe the cable, the power cable will get disrupted and they will not be able to handle it. And as a result, the lesson will be disrupted, because the technicians, they have two technicians that are attached to 6 computer laboratory. that they are using. So the technicians are very few, and they are not easily, you can't easily get them. So as a result, when I was interviewing one of the beginning teachers, they said, there is a smart board in your classroom, and you need to teach PowerPoint to this student. Why are you not using it? Then it now told me, she just smiled and said, oh, even though during my professional development, you see, they use it for us, but that she's fearful about maybe there will be technical problem that she will not be able to handle, and she'll be embarrassed before the student, and she wants to avoid embarrassment.
So let me just...
My question now is that... so my question
frame
now...
your question before you ask it, okay?
Okay, is that how can this problem be solved in their professional development? How can we incorporate, handling minor technical issues? How can we teach these teachers so that they will be, even though they have innovative ideas, but they are running away from really using this ICT tools? So how can we incorporate it, not necessarily making them a technicians, but how can we incorporate this one in their professional development program? Thank you.
I'd like to take a stab at that. First off, I call this technology hardening, okay, and every school has got to teach basic technology hardening skills. That's simple, where's the plugs, where's the on-offs, all those kinds of things. The other thing that's happening right now is the best technology is the simplest technology. iPads, mobile technologies, things like that. They never break, okay? And so as a result, you've got to be very careful in your selection of technology. You get the most problems with display systems, your Promethean systems, your smart boards, etc. I mean, this is the real world, and it's not so much because of the system itself, it's because the districts control the systems, okay? They control like if something burns out, a teacher doesn't go out and get a $300 bulb and plug it in. They have to call the central office to do it, okay? So that's about a week's worth of effort right there. So you've got to, what I teach the teachers is basically always have a backup. Always have a backup. It's the same thing as we do up here. If I've got a PowerPoint or I've got some other kind of presentation, I've always got a backup on that thing. It's, these are transitional times for us, and as we simplify and make technology, unobtrusive and immersive, these things will go away for us, but we are in those transitional times, and teachers need to be aware of that so that they are capable of handling the small problems and of shifting if the problem is too big for them to solve.
When we think about exponential times, I know we've done a lot with technology and innovative practices, but to hear from 4 deans, demand for state-of-the-art R&D in education that matches military and business, a person who has to teach nations of tribes, literally nations within his educational program. Imagine what it's like to have an earthquake and you have to reach out to your students. A scaled 6,000 students, and you have to meet demands, master-level demands in the entire country. Amazing stuff. Dean Palmer, Dean Howell, Dean Connor, Dean Wagner, thank you very much.
Good to see you.